Hi, I'm Caleb. I'm a cardist, and I'm interviewing other cardists to see how and why they create, so we can learn how to grow as a community. Welcome to Cardistry Talk. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Cardistry Talk. Today, I'm joined by the wonderful Beckett Behel. Did I say your last name right?
Yeah, that's correct, actually.
Okay. I always forget to ask that at the beginning before we start recording. So Beckett Behel, he's an incredible artist. You may know him from Instagram. That's probably where he posts the most, but he also has some stuff on YouTube and has a lot of other hobbies outside of cardistry. And I'm really excited to have you on the show. How was your day?
It's doing pretty good. Pretty good.
Awesome. Yeah, got some extra hours of sleep in, hopefully.
Yeah.
So just jumping into some questions, just try to get some meaty content early on, looking back at like some of your older cardistry, like the first post that you have that's at least still available is the geodisc display that you had. How do you think you've progressed as a cardist over time?
A quick aside, that's actually the first post I ever made. I decided to keep it up for like archival reasons. But I think at the beginning, for about a year and a year and a half or so, I would just learn moves from other people. So a lot of my stuff was just influenced by the style at the time. Then as time went on, I started learning people's moves less. I would just create variations on things I had already made and new ideas I had. It's kind of like trying to do my best to carve my own path. And so I feel like that has kind of led to me creating packet cuts, which, oh, at least when I started out, I had some rules for myself for packet cuts, stuff like having no base packets. Because at the time, there was a huge amount of cuts where base packets were just sitting there doing nothing for an entire cut. I wanted no dead packets that weren't moving. And I wasn't very good at not having dead packets, but
Mm-hmm.
as time went on, I was able to take these restrictions and do them better and better, I guess. So yeah, I guess like everyone, my style has just been a tale of just improving and improving changes.
Mm-hmm. Do you look back and like ever think like, oh, why'd I post that? Or like that's a little cringe, or like do you see like a steady progression of improvement?
I never really cringe because of the moves I create. I do cringe sometimes when I see old captions, old comments, stuff like that, old responses.
Mm-hmm.
Um, just things like that that have to do with because around the time I started cardistry, and like many other cardists, I wasn't the most social person. So of course I laugh at my own personality back then and cringe a little bit. But yeah, I do see a lot of progression when I look back, especially in terms of cardistry. That's actually why I like to keep my posts public, because I like to be able to look back there every now and then and see, oh, even the Charlotte cut was hard for me at one point, and look at how far I am now with this one-handed cut, and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's really cool. I know like Zach Mueller with the Fontaine account has like he has like all his old vlogs and stuff from like when he's like in his teens, and he's like
Yeah,
he said something pretty similar, like it's kind of dishonoring to who you are to not like acknowledge how far you've come, you
yeah.
know?
You cringe, then you laugh, and then you just own it.
Hmm. And then talking about the comments that you said, like looking back at comments and like cringing and whatnot, one thing I do like about you is that you're actually like talk about cardistry, I guess, instead of just posting moves, and like how like things you dislike about what people have made, and like actually like having a voice of like commentary.
Oh yeah.
Um, so like one thing that you've posted on that I would like you to maybe talk about and explain is the concept of floating, because this is something I really hadn't thought much about until I listened to you chat about it on your post, and something I want to try to integrate getting rid of in my cardistry if I can. But what is floating, and what do you kind of dislike about it?
Yeah, this kind of makes me laugh a little bit because a lot of these little observations I find are pet peeves I see from people performing my own moves. And so floating, it came from this move that I created called collapsible. It looks something like this. And a lot of people, when they do it, they have this little thing at the beginning, And for some reason, they find that really hard. So they do kind of a motion like this. I'm exaggerating, but they do something like that, which breaks the flow. And when I do cuts, the focus is not the hands, it's the packets. And actually, that's what someone told me when I posted my first cut on Reddit a long time ago. I had a lot of arm motions and stuff, and this was very in vogue back in the XCM days. But when you're trying to do complex interactions with packets and you want to accentuate certain motions, you don't want to draw attention to those hands. You just want to make sure that they can see the mechanics going on. And so floating is when you are moving your arms around way too much for a cut, whether it's to try and accentuate it, or if it's just because you aren't really good at the cut. And what I tried to tell people to do, and this is a concept that I think Kevin Ho may have come up with, it's called framing, where you imagine like a frame where your cardistry is taking place. Some moves, it's a small frame, it's kind of close up. Some of them, it's a big frame and kind of out here. And so you don't want to have the audience's focus being brought all around. You want to move your hands just enough so that you focus it on where you want them to see. Like for instance, let's see. I think for collapsible, this is a pretty straightforward one because I generally don't have that much arm motion. In fact, I actually try not to move this left wrist that much because I like the idea of the right hand kind of moving around the left hand and doing all this stuff. And I think it works pretty well. There's probably better ways to think about exactly how to not float in this cut. I think that works pretty well. In general, it's like, as I said before, when I created restrictions on how I create cuts, there's just way too many possibilities if you let yourself be completely free with creative choice. And so if you add just enough restriction, you'll know, you'll have fewer things to choose from, and then the better choice will pop out to you better, if that all makes sense.
Yeah. I really like you mentioning the restriction thing because that's something I really agree with too. Like, and I think it doesn't just apply to cardistry, but like I think when you look at movies, like maybe Paranormal Activity or like the Blair Witch Project, relating it to Halloween, but like you have like a really small budget and you kind of have to do something different, just in general.
Yeah, it really
So
forces creativity in a more natural way than, trying to really force it.
mhm. Have you find, because I know I've seen you use trainers a lot, but do you find using trainers limits kind of does that for you, like limits the amount of packets you can use and helps you creatively or not?
And I actually, I know that some people have a love-hate relationship with trainers. Some people have a hate relationship with them.
Hmm.
And I personally, I really love using them because a lot of moves that I've created were created using trainers. For instance, I had this little cut right here. I call it bismuth. Oops. Sometimes
Hmm.
drag cards, you can see. And I created that with trainers, and I thought it was pretty good. I think the difference between creating cuts with trainers and creating cuts with cards is not the fact that they are packets, it's the fact that the packets are all the same size. Because with some of my one-handed cuts, for instance, you need packets of different sizes to get some of the things to work. Like you see with like levering things, and you need differing weights with some cuts. And that's one of the things where trainers don't work so well. But where they do work really well is with any cuts where packets are sliding along the hand.
Hmm.
Anything which is kind of close together, stuff like that really works well with trainers. And I think there's a lot of potential when it comes to trainers that people don't really look at. For instance, a lot of perching ideas. I don't know if you know what perching is, but it's any cuts where a packet is like on top of another packet,
Hmm.
and like the main packet's moving around with that packet on top, perched on top, I guess. And stuff like that really works well with trainers. And I think Chase Duncan, he's probably the best example of really good cuts with trainers. And so I actually have a goal for myself someday to create cuts, to create a few cuts which can only be done with trainers, partly
Hmm.
to stick it to people who really don't like them and think that it's not real cardistry, as if that's really a thing, and partly because I think it would be fun to have cuts that you can only do with squids or trainers or what have you.
Hmm. I really like the idea. I don't know if squids are epoxy, right? Or
I think so. I have no clue, honestly.
yeah, epoxy trainers like they can stick together if you like squeeze them.
Oh yeah,
And I really feel
yeah,
like that needs to be played around with.
yeah. I did try playing around with stuff like that a long time ago. I had some of the newer squids, the thinner ones, and they stuck together really well in hot weather. And I had the idea of having a reverse perching thing where it's like perching, but it's on the bottom because it's sticking there. I didn't do much with it because I actually ended up painting those squids with. Do you know what Black 3.0 paint is? It's supposedly the darkest paint in the world. Um,
Hmm,
and so I painted it with that and made like void squids.
that's cool.
I think I have the post on my Instagram. I may or may not, but yeah. But yeah, I it didn't turn out as good as I hoped, unfortunately. So I've been trying to get the paint off the squids since then. But yeah.
Just in general, trainers or not, do you have like any sort of process when you're trying to go to create a move, or is it just kind of free form, random, or is it different for
Oh, I
everyone?
really like this question because there's actually a way I specifically think about creating cuts. Many people, when they are creators, when they're asked a question, usually it's something along the lines of what's your creative process. But I think that it's best to know several different creative processes, like a toolbox, and you can take one out. For instance, with one of my cuts, Chestnut, it's a very kind of
Yes.
big 7 pack of cuts. And the way I created that cut, I actually just came up with this. And I said,
Hmm.
okay, what could you do with this? And just over the course of one night, by some miracle, I managed to figure out some mechanics where it's constantly moving forward throughout the cut. And that worked out pretty well with that cut. It doesn't work out for most cuts, honestly. That was mostly a fluke. But yeah, that's one tool in the toolbox. A lot of times I'll actually take a mechanic and like most other cardists, I'll try to create an opener and a closer, or I'll find a cool opener and I'll try to find the rest. One of my favorite ways actually, and I haven't had much success with it, but I like the idea of it, is to take a um, word or phrase, some interesting word or phrase, and try to create a cut based on it. I don't know if I have one off the top of my head right now, but for instance, if you wanted to, because I like to name small cuts after confectionery, candies and stuff like that.
Hmm.
I think I wanted to create like a one-handed cut with like 2 packets called like Skittles or something, where they're just like moving around a bunch. You know, Skittles sounds like something where it's like moving around real fast. I
Yeah.
wanted to create something like that. So trying to create cuts based on what a word sounds like or a phrase sounds like um, is an interesting idea to me. I haven't had much success with it because it's very hard for me to do, but
Hmm.
maybe someone else will.
What I like to do, and I'm not saying like this is a good way of creating, this is just what I do. Often I'll just try to find a unique grip and then just
Oh
play
yeah,
with that.
that's how I've created most of my cuts, honestly, trying to find a unique starting grip.
Hmm. So I always love to ask that question because I feel like everybody's a little bit different. And like you said, like I've never heard anybody say like a toolbox, and I really like that idea of trying to do different ways for each time. I think that could lead to some really awesome creativity. What are some inspirations when you go to create moves or just in general for life?
Um, let's see. When I'm creating moves, usually what happens, and it's not terribly efficient. I come up with something. Maybe I come up with a grip, maybe an opener or a moment, and then I just workshop it. And I try to listen to music when I do cardistry because I've heard from other people that it helps them create cardistry that fits well with the music. I've never had much success with it, honestly, because I don't have the patience to scroll through the 7,000 songs on my phone and find something that I think would fit. But I like to think that someday I'll have the patience to do that. But yeah, I lost my train of thought. What was the question again?
Just what are some inspirations for
Oh
you?
yeah. Sometimes I actually, and this goes back to the creative toolbox question. I sometimes will get an idea from a TV show or something like there will be a character or something like that that I like. Like suppose there's a character that has a rather conniving kind of I don't know, like think of if you know Harry Potter Mundungus Fletcher, something like that.
Mhm.
And then how could you put sneakiness into a cut? You could think of maybe having something where a packet appears from nowhere, or you could think about just in terms of motion, having packets which kind of glide smoothly over each other, kind of a flat. At least that's kind of how I would envision sneakiness represented in cardistry. Sometimes I will do that, and other times I take a lot of inspiration from my own stuff in a way, and from the add another packet mentality. If you've seen my Feldspar series, the three one-handed cuts, they all use the same thumb mechanic, and I wanted to just add stuff to it. And so I ended up thinking, how can I add another packet to it? And after I ended up adding a second packet to the thumb motion, I realized that it was actually that the first one is actually a false cut, which was completely unintentional and annoys some people, which I like. I like annoying people in fun little ways. And I then realized that the variation I created with four packets was not false. So I tried to create a false version, and that's actually the modern version, the most refined version of Feldspar X. And there's a whole story behind the names of Feldspar. It's very nerdy. And then, and again, add another packet. That's how Feldspar came out. It wasn't, it's unfortunately not a false cut, but I think it makes up for it in the fact that it's a five packet one-handed cut.
One thing that I kind of want to just touch on too is like how you said with like add another packet and that type of thing. Like you never really know when a move is complete, and
Yeah.
that's something Lars said too. Real quick, Lars is going to be next week, people. Um, so when I was doing research on him, but like you never know when a move's going to be complete, and like you can always, not always, but a lot of times you can add on to it, and like you have like several different versions of Feldspar now, and like you can
Yeah.
potentially add more. So like it's really cool to
You know,
see.
and even with like quote unquote completed two-handed cuts, I'll come up with some refinement several years later. And that's also why I tend to private old two-handed cut tutorials because they tend not to actually apply anymore. Even say 3 or 4 years down the line, I'll come up with something that completely changes it. Well, it doesn't completely change it. It still looks the same to most people, but it is a refinement that makes it easier for people to learn. And I hope someday that I will be able to make revised tutorials or stuff like that. But yeah, it is a little annoying sometimes having something that you change because of this small thing and then the old stuff no longer applies. But at the same time, it's pretty cool how nothing really is complete.
And then just talking about your tutorials too, because like you have some beefy tutorials, which I really
Yeah.
like, because I feel like a lot of tutorials aren't super in depth. Like you go over the history of how it was made too, and like go into a lot more detail. So I just want to say I really like that. Do you have any advice for if people want to make their own tutorials, how they could make them better, or any tips in that respect?
Okay, first of all, you have to make sure that when you are doing a tutorial, don't repeat yourself. It's and don't slow down because you think the people following the tutorial are slow or will have trouble with it. And that's because it's a video, they can pause and go back when they want. And if someone happens to be able to follow your tutorial, then they can follow along with it in real time. I think that in general, people, when they make tutorials, they pander to the lowest difficulty level possible. And I know that some people should do that. For instance, School of Cardistry or Lotus Enhanced tutorials. That makes complete sense to do that. But I don't create moves like that. I don't teach moves like that. So I teach to the level. I try to teach to a level or a skill level that would be able to comfortably do the move, if that makes sense. Because I think anyone technically could learn any move, the mechanics of the move,
Mhm.
but you have to be a certain skill level to be able to get it smooth and to add your own twist on it. Because no one should really learn a move exactly how the creator does it. I don't think that really works. I do go into a lot of detail on stuff like flow and stuff, which I think is very important. Because I think before you add your own twist to a movie, you should try to learn it. Try as hard as you can to learn it exactly as the creator did it. All the timings, all the stuff like that. And my advice for people to make sure the tutorial doesn't get too bogged down with detail. I generally will go through all the overview of the mechanics, go through all the explanations of the major stuff you need to know. And then often, actually, I don't know if I do it in modern tutorials now, but yeah, what I used to do is I would often go through it a second time, just pointing out small little things you can do here and there. I think what I do now is I don't care about the bloats and I just do it, but I'd have to watch one of my tutorials and check to see if I do that again. But yeah, in general, it's all about attention to detail. And I think in my case, it actually stems from the fact that I get annoyed when I see people performing my moves and something that seems obvious to me, um, they just don't do at all. And I know that's a little bit unfair, but at the same time, if you spend months and months on something and then you don't teach it well enough, or if you don't make it obvious in a tutorial, it's kind of your own fault. So I try to make sure that I put in all the detail I can in my tutorial.
I really like how you said not to teach people the exact way you do it, I guess,
Yeah,
because everybody's hands are either
yeah. I
different
would
sizes
technically,
and
I
etc.
would teach them all the little details I can think of, but I won't tell them they have to do it this way. Stuff like the rhythm and the flow, I will say, "Oh, just learn it my way, and then you can add your own thing." Because 99 times out of 100, when I see someone add their own thing to my own cuts, and this is not me trying to like toot my own horn, but it just looks bad to me, the stuff they try to do. And I think that many people when they learn cuts, when they learn from tutorials, they assume that you can watch it once through and then have them move down by just practicing for a few weeks. But that's just not what happens. In fact, I learned Kashmir by Oliver Sogard, and I learned how to do it backwards, if you saw that post.
Hmm.
And in order to do that, I had to watch, and I know there's not a tutorial for it, but the same idea applies. I had to watch his performance of it over and over in reverse, actually, to figure out the exact timings that I would need. And stuff like that, it is very difficult to do that, which is why I try to go into the necessary detail to allow someone to learn a cut to that point, to where they theoretically could perform it backwards. I don't think you could actually perform any of my cuts backwards, honestly, because I use gravity and momentum way too much in them. But the thought still applies.
Is how do you kind of manage time with cardistry and then your life in general?
Like a lot of artists, I imagine, back when I started. Let's see, 2014. I think I was a freshman in high school, something like that. Um, but I would spend way too much time shuffling cards, and it was actually a little bit of a problem. And so later, I would often go through these periods where I would just take a break, not do cards at all, just to focus on life stuff. Then I would go back to doing too much time with cards. And at some point, one of the things that actually really helps me balance that back out is I stopped really keeping up daily with all the Instagram stuff, all the stuff that people are posting. And I think that there's something to be said about waiting for a video to come out on YouTube, a cardistry video on YouTube, because for one thing, you're still getting your exposure to cardistry. I actually think that the output on YouTube, although it's slower than the output on Instagram, it's about the same in the long run, the amount of content that comes out. And little things like that, like trying not to worry too much about keeping up with the community, just trying to do my own thing. And also realizing that it's not the length of time you practice that matters. Sure, actually, no, it's not the duration of time. The length of time, as in how long you've been doing cardistry, generally does matter. If you've been doing cardistry continuously, let's say you practice, I don't know, every other day for 10 years, you're going to be better than someone who practiced 8 hours a day for 5 years. And I think that's something Tobias Levin said in a book somewhere. But yeah, but the amount of time you practice every day, it doesn't really matter so much as whether you're practicing or whether you're just fiddling around with stuff that you're comfortable with. And I would say there's certainly a place for fiddling around with stuff. We can't constantly be pushing ourselves to new heights. Every one of us is going to plateau several times as we do cardistry. And I feel that in order to, um, at least for me, since I don't view cardistry as like, I don't want to do any sort of make a living off cardistry. I don't want to do like creating a deck or any of that stuff because that seems like way too much time for me. I'm a
Hmm.
physics student, so I don't really have that time anyway.
Yeah.
But I think that if you're in my position where you don't want to do it for money, um, it really helps if you can try to be mindful of your practice. And I hear some people, they actually schedule out their practice time. I don't really do that. When inspiration strikes, I'm going to mess around with cards and maybe mess around with it until I get bored of the move. There's something Oliver said in an interview a long, long time ago that if he's playing with a move and he can't come up with a closer before the end of the practice session, he comes up with a kind of just um, a temporary closer. And that kind of gives him closure
Hmm.
of the move itself, creative closure. And so I would say to most people, if you want to really balance your life and cardistry, and if you are like me and you just want it to be a hobby, um, first of all, don't treat it as a big deal. Second, realize that 8 hours a day, it doesn't really do anything for you. It doesn't make you happier. It doesn't make you
Hmm.
better. And third, um, just be content to just um, finish something sloppily for now and then just pick it up later. Even if it's months later, you'll still have a better creative perspective than if you keep your head down in the weeds trying to pick at it and pick at it.
Hmm. I think there's something to be said about like quality of time versus like quantity of time as well. Like
Yeah.
some people will just like you'll sit with trying to create something like you said and not have that temporary closer and you're just wasting time trying to do something when you don't have that creativity. Um, and with practicing moves too, I had Bear Cardistry on the show earlier. He was talking about how like quality of practice for learning moves too is really important for time management because like if you're trying to go 100% speed, like you're not gonna be instead of focusing on the parts where you're getting hiccups, it can really make choppy flow.
This is actually related to something else. A lot of people know I play piano, and then they'll ask me, hey, does piano help with your cardistry or vice versa? And I think what they usually expect or are asking is whether the dexterity that comes from one helps with the other. And I generally find that's not necessarily the case. Maybe finger independence is better, but the best quality you can learn from piano, music, any other profession really, or skill that helps with cardistry is knowing how to practice. That's the best thing, and no dexterity or anything. The finger motions in both are completely different, so I think that doesn't matter as much as knowing how to practice, how to be efficient with your time.
Hmm. Do you think that like spills over into like you said? What did you say you were um, studying? Sorry,
Oh yeah, physics.
physics. Okay, yeah. Have you found like that helps you with studying or like being good with time management of studying has spilled over into your hobbies at all?
I feel like it does. First of all, no, I'm not like the most studious student ever, but
Hmm.
I do think it helps me. I do think it helps me, and vice versa. Knowing how to buckle down in cardistry or piano also helps with studying for school or anything else really.
Hmm. It's just an important skill in general.
Yeah.
So you talked about piano a little bit, but what are some of your other hobbies outside of cardistry and
Let's
other
see.
interests?
Um, I guess I'm a very stereotypical Asian, honestly. I did karate for a few years. I got to a black belt back when I was 13 or so. Just, no, actually 12, something like that. But yeah, I was a black belt. I did that. And for a period, I would do a hobby each year. not consciously, but I ended up just taking on a hobby each year, dropping
Hmm.
the old one. I learned origami one year, then I moved on to paper airplanes. Um, Not like, the triangle ones, like ones with like four wings or six wings, the ones that look like actual jet fighters, stuff like that.
Hmm.
Then I moved on to Rubik's Cubes, and then I moved on to Cardistry. That one happened to stick. The other ones didn't.
Hmm.
As for hobbies right now, piano is definitely a big one. Because piano and cardistry take up so much time, they generally are the main hobbies I have now. Although I do a little bit of singing. I do a little bit of um, reading when I have the free time. Reading outside of school, I mean. I had a whole bookshelf of books that I mean to read, but I haven't really gotten around to. So I'm kind of slogging through that right now when I have
Hmm.
the time.
Do you find like I don't know if you've seen any of this stuff, but like Cardistry Touch with like their charting system and as well as like Matthew Badwal's analysis type looking at cardistry. Do you think that's similar to like music theory and like music sheets at all?
I think it is similar. I don't know if it's well, first of all, I'm kind of meh at music theory. I can
Hmm.
work my way around it. But I know there's a big argument among arts, whether music theory or dance theory or, breaking stuff down in general, whether that takes away from the art. And for me personally, I don't think it does, but I also don't have enough experience with music theory or like breaking down these things to know whether it really affects it or not, takes away the art in some sense. I have a feeling it doesn't. But I think that approach works for some people and it doesn't work at all for others.
Hmm.
Um, the cardistry thing, what did they call it? Cardistry touches
I can't remember
notation
what they
system.
called it, the sheeting system that they did. I think it
Oh,
was CGN or something.
yeah, that was it.
Which I don't know what
First
that
of all,
stands for,
their
but
announcement video, a little a little bit cringy, a little bit. But aside from
yeah.
that, it's a very interesting idea. And if I were, say, I don't know, a computer programmer, or if I was interested in that kind of thing, I think I would enjoy it. But for me, it's getting a bit too into the weeds for me to really find it interesting. Um, and I think it would actually, for me, it would hinder my creativity to try and think about it in that kind of terms, because they did float the idea of trying to create moves from CGN in the video. I think they floated that idea. But yeah, I think stuff like that, and also hyper analytical, breaking down how to create cardistry moves or breaking down existing cardistry moves. In general, I find that very interesting from a creative perspective of how they created the move, not
Hmm.
necessarily why this style of move creates this kind of motion or this kind of reaction in the audience. Stuff like that, it's not too interesting to me. I encourage everyone to really try looking at something analytically. What I do not encourage is trying to create something analytically, because that just has never worked for me. I don't know of anyone it's worked for. There may be some people it has worked for, but I think that looking at things analytically, it helps you best in terms of understanding why a creator created the move, what
Hmm.
decisions they made. And that's what you take away from it. You don't take away things like, oh, after I do this certain grip, it always works best to do this next thing. Little things like that doesn't necessarily work. Like you can't do music theory. You can create songs from music theory, but you can't create songs from rigid rules created from music theory. If that makes
Hmm.
sense. That's not really musical. And I think that in general, people should at least try out CGN stuff like that. At least try to see if it works for them, and then they can try and go on and see if it helps their creativity. It didn't for me, but I'm sure it will help some people.
I really like that you said to not post cardistry to Instagram and be famous in the community.
Yeah. Oh, this is actually an interesting topic to me because there's always, when I'm talking to, I would say younger cardists in quotes because they're not necessarily younger than me. They're just newer to the community. When I talk to people like that who are creators as cardists, not necessarily just people who learn moves, um, it's very hard to talk to them about. success in the community because there's survivor bias. And that's in the sense that things that worked for me may not work for someone else. Things that I did may not work for someone else. Because I know that in general, I was very lucky to get to where I am in the community right now. And I think the major factor that actually helped me become big was just by um, posting consistently over a long period of time and people getting to know me that way. But I see a lot of people, they try to get as famous as they can very early. And that makes sense to me, honestly. And that makes sense to anyone because, of course, if you create stuff, you want people to see it. But
Hmm.
at the same time, if that's your goal, it's like a paradox. There's probably some name for it where you naturally want your stuff to be famous. But at the same time, if you focus on that, you're inevitably gonna just slip in terms of quality. You're gonna end up just following trends instead of creating them yourself. Actually, I think in the for the past few years, some people they talk about whether you should follow trends as a creator or whether
Hmm.
you should um, create trends. And when I say follow trends, that's not a bad thing because you can innovate on a current trend and become big that way. But I think that it's best not to really think about stuff like that if you're trying to create cardistry. If you should create what is cool to you, because how most people start cardistry, they think, oh, this is a really cool thing they're doing, all this flipping and stuff like that. I want to be able to flip cards too, and I
Hmm.
think that would be cool if I can do those cool things. And so I generally try to take the most relaxed view on cardistry possible in terms of creating stuff. I try to create stuff that I would think is cool. And that's going to be different for everyone. But I think that um, in terms of finding your style, finding your niche within the community, that works a lot better than trying to try out every single trend and see which one sticks with you.
And then also like when I had Sean O on the show earlier, like he said that his goal with his cardistry is just to reach the maximum amount of people possible to try to bring people into the to cardistry,
Yeah,
which like I think if that's your goal, like that's awesome and like that totally makes sense. But like if you're
yeah,
just doing it to, you know, first off, like fame isn't even really a super great thing because it disrupts privacy and stuff like that.
hmm,
So I don't know. I just don't think I see so much of this right now of like people just chasing fame with cardistry, quote unquote fame, and I hate it.
yeah.
So
I'd also like to add there's kind of a trend of hating people who are famous in the community. And while I do understand that, I think for people like Sean, I fully understand why they're doing what they do. I think it's a great idea, a great approach to how to do cardistry, bring people in the community. Stuff like him, the Verts to another extent.
mhm.
But when it comes to people like John Stessel and what's her name, Anna de Guzman, a lot of people hate on them for the most tiny and reasons, really. Like people seem to hate them because when they show cardistry to people, they only show like three different moves that all the laymen freak out over. And I don't know for sure if those people actually are doing it just for fame because I've never talked to them. I do know from many secondhand sources that they are actually nice people, people like John Cecil and Anna de Guzman. But I do think that people, they kind of get a little bit too belligerent, a little bit too angry over these famous people in the
Yeah,
community. They really hate on them when they go on TV and do isolations.
you can work really hard on a move like for hours, and then it only gets like a couple hundred views, and then they can
Yeah.
post like a spring and it'll get thousands.
It's a valid concern or it's a valid feeling, but at the same time, it's also not when you really think about it. I mean, I won't fault anyone who feels like that because I definitely feel like that whenever I see someone like that post spring or a waterfall. Um, but at the same time, the reason why I feel like I don't get too bothered by it in the long run is because I realize that it's really just jealousy. That's really all it is. It's you're not objectively correct in thinking that their work is worth less than your work, and therefore they should not be as famous as you, or you should be as famous as them. Because at the end of the day, that's just jealousy, that's just fantasy. And I think that trying to think too much about fairness and stuff and like, what you deserve as a artist, that just brings you down an odd path of like trying to create not because you want to create, but just because you want to be famous. It just doesn't seem healthy to me.
Like, how do you even compare? Like, you can't really compare like rap and
Yeah,
rock and say like one's better.
no,
Like, they might be better suited to you for different reasons, but it doesn't mean one is necessarily better. It's all subjective.
yeah, it's like you can't really say, oh, this guy's the best cardist in the world, or this guy's the best packet cutter. For one thing, there's so many types of packet cutting. This guy's the best fanner. There's so many different types of fanning. Actually, maybe for niche things in cardistry, you can say this guy's the best fanner. Because people like Predator or Baptiste Blonde, you can say easily those two best fanners in cardistry. But I think for in general with cardistry, just like with music, you can't say, oh, this genre of complex stuff is better than this genre of simple stuff. Um, Actually, it goes into there's another parallel with the music there because in a lot of modern music, and I know there's a lot of hate for some modern music because it just sounds like noise to many people. It just sounds discordant. And when I say modern music, I mean like the stuff that started in the mid 20th century, the kind of avant-garde classical music. And what a lot of them are doing, they're trying to explore ideas and theory of music and try to express them in music itself. At least that's kind of what I gleaned from my few forays into that area of music. And it seems similar to how people with very complex packet cuts, they're trying to explore this idea and try to bring it into a move. And I think that um, I lost my train of thought. What was I talking about right before this? Oh yeah, the um, the I guess you could say struggle in most communities between the very complex but very work intensive versus the very simple but seemingly not work intensive stuff. I think that in general people get way too angry with people who do the simple things. They get way too angry with people who just learn music and don't create music or just learn cardistry and get famous off doing um, moves very well. Like there's this guy Mads Schultz, maybe something like that. He did curly Q, the little fan string thing, and he got tons of followers by doing that like every day, very very well. He's probably the best person at that, aside from maybe Zach Mueller. And I think that a lot of people they seem to get mad at him for it, but at the same time, it's like you can't really compare that to something like Patrick Barnabas. It's just way too different. It's too esoteric, too nebulous, really. But yeah, I'm not sure what my point exactly is, but I think I'm getting to the idea that the same thing that you said, but in longer, more meandering paths, that you can't really compare these genres to these other genres, and you can't really say this genre, people who do this deserve more fame than the other people, I guess.
Going on to some lighter topics that I know I want to hit because this is something people wanted me to ask you about. They want to know about your dogs,
Oh yeah, my dogs.
Revel and
Um,
Coco.
yeah. So I got the Ravel like back in what was it? Maybe 2014, 2015. Coincidentally, around the same time I started cardistry, I think. And so Ravel, he's the black and white dog. He's a Havanese. Actually, when we got that dog, when we got him, or before we got him, actually, my mom was asking us, okay, what should we name this dog? And we landed on the idea of naming him after a composer of some sort, just any composer. And we floated the idea of Dvorak, same guy who wrote the New World Symphony. But unfortunately, my littlest brother, he was like, I don't know, 5 at the time. He couldn't pronounce Dvorak. So we landed with Ravel, who also happens to be my favorite classical piano composer. So That's Ravel. Maurice Ravel Beal, or Mr. B, Mr. Beal. And then we noticed after a few months that he was having fun. He was playing with us a lot, but he was also a little mopey. So we ended up getting Coco so that he could actually play with another dog. And Coco is, we're not exactly sure. She may be Havanese Shih Tzu mixed or something like that. But when my family drove over there to pick her up, for some reason I didn't go along. I don't know why. She was a rescue, and the person who had rescued her had like 20 dogs in this one house, and they all like jumped on counters, ran around. They had one big food bowl that they all fought over. It was like dog anarchy. And so Coco, even now, she jumps on couches. She tries to get on counters. She's like a cat dog, really. Yeah. Coco and Ravel, they look like puppies. They're actually technically not puppies still, but yeah, I still treat them like puppies.
Yeah, I just want to make sure to make a mention of that, because like that, and then like they weren't really questions. People were like, I want to know more about the dogs. And then like the other half of the people were like, just tell him that he's really good. Like somebody asked, like, what is it like to be a cardistry god?
Cardistry god.
Yeah.
Well, for one thing, you feel like you don't deserve it at first, but then later on you're like, okay, I guess people think this about me. But at the same time, I feel completely normal, so I guess I'm completely normal. It's an odd feeling, really. The idea of being famous in the community rarely crosses my mind. It's to the extent where if I talk about it with my parents, they say, oh, this guy from Korea just happened to comment on my post. They'll say, someone from Korea follows you? You have an international following? I'll be like, oh yeah, I guess I do. Is that impressive? And they'll be like, whoa, or something like that. It's very interesting. It's very flattering. At the same time, I guess I'm too bashful to really be arrogant. Actually, is that an arrogant thing to say, that I'm too bashful to be arrogant?
To be arrogant.
I don't know. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but it's just so weird because I feel completely normal. I'm doing my own thing. I like detail, and I like doing the best I can with creating these moves, and it just happens to be working out for me. So I don't know. It's weird. That's the bottom line.
So I think we covered a lot of really good questions. I think there's a lot of interesting stuff that people could draw from that. At the end of the show, I like to do what I call the rapid round of questions, which is a bunch of random questions. The goal is to answer them as quickly as possible. All right, so I'm starting the timer now. If an actor was to portray you in a movie, who would you want it to be?
Who's the guy from Crazy Rich Asians? The what is it? Love interest, whatever. I don't know his name, but he seems pretty cool.
Coke or Pepsi?
Coke.
Cats or dogs? Probably
dogs.
Yeah. What would the title of your autobiography be?
Me.
All right. Favorite genre of music?
Anything really.
Pancakes versus waffles?
Pancakes, definitely.
Okay, I gotta make sure I hit up this question. Toilet paper roll, does it go over or under?
It goes over, because then you can do the little fancy triangle if you really want to.
Good. Pineapples on pizza. Does pineapple belong on pizza?
I've never eaten it, but I like to go along with everyone and say it's disgusting.
Favorite food or restaurant?
I really like spaghetti, and I really like soup. I went through a period where I ate only pub-style chicken pot pie, Campbell's soup, every day.
If you could add any word to the dictionary, what would you want it to be?
I'd add a word to the dictionary. I don't know.
We'll just say cardistry. Cardistry isn't in the dictionary. In the Webster's dictionary, at least. If you could have any superpower, what would it be?
I would like to be able to speak fluently and read and write every language in the world.
That'd be awesome. Favorite movie?
I watched what was it, John Wick recently for the first time. Not my favorite movie, but I finally saw it. It was really fun.
Memorable. Is there a deck that you think is underrated? Playing card deck?
Animal Kingdoms by Theory 11.
Yeah, I saw a lot of that. Summer or winter?
Um, Fall.
Fall. Okay. Go off the beaten path. Have you ever broken a bone?
Luckily, no.
Right. If you could have coffee with any Disney character, who would it be?
Who are Disney characters?
Mickey, Goofy,
I don't know. Who's that lion from The Lion King?
Simba.
The father.
Oh, Mufasa.
I don't know. Maybe I'd like to coffee with the voice actor. He seems like a cool guy.
There's a timer. 3 minutes. Awesome.
That was pretty
Yeah, I
quick.
think we got through a lot of questions. I'll tally it up. I think the high score right now is 15.
15.
But I'm not sure how many we just got through. I think that timer helps a lot, though. Beckett, thank you for being on the show. I really appreciate you taking your time. At the end of the show, I like to do a thing called Rule Out the Close-Up Pad. Is there anything that you would like to promote or any last nugget you would like to leave the people listening or watching?
People always ask me whether I have a new cut in the works, so I guess I can show off an opener I have, and I've been stuck on it for a while. And a lot of what the thing with me is I do not save content. When I complete something, I like to post it right away.
Mm-hmm.
But what I do like to do is I hoard a lot of openers, a lot of little ideas, and one of the ones I'm messing around with right now. It's very hard to do since it's also very recent. You see this structure right here. It's actually based off Panda Ring by Tobias, and I have this sliding package right here. I've been messing around with how I can move this bottom packet around and, slide them around, like a new Tobias style.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I guess that's the most interesting thing I have right now. I tend not to save stuff, but I do have a lot of small little nuggets. Oh, there's one other thing I really like. I'm probably not going to post this because technically someone came up with it already. But if you know, there's Zooey, he has this thing right here with 2 spinning packets. I
Mm-hmm.
came up with a way to open and close it with one hand. And that's when you do this, you can spin it. And I found out a really fun little closer for it. Let's see if I can do this. Again, this is another recent little thing, but I found this fun little thing. It kind of just closes like that. Then you can go off and do whatever other one-handed things you want to do. But yeah, just 2 little things.
No, that's great. I will add too, I'll have link to Beckett's YouTube and Instagram, all that, etc. stuff in the description. So check that out if for some reason you know who I am and not him, which is doubtful. But yeah, thank you everybody that stopped and listened all the way to the end. Beckett, once again, thanks for taking your time, and we will see you guys later.
Thank you for having me.